This is Brad at Attitude RC. Today we're going to be moving a model, and the reason I'm doing this is I want to move some of my smaller things off of my Horus onto my Turnigy 9XR Pro. And that's just mainly for convenience, and also if somebody else wants to fly some of my smaller things, I can just hand them the radio while I'm flying one of my other radios, or one of my other planes or helis. So, moving them to the Turnigy 9X Pro or moving them to another Opentx radio from one radio can sometimes cause some issues, especially going to the 9XR Pro. And the reason is they have different switches. So I'm going to show you an easy way to work through that. And it does take a couple minutes, and but I'll show you some tricks I've learned. So the first thing you're going to do is find the model you want to move and copy it. Copy one model. File, new. We're going to make a whole new, and we're just going to call this one move. And you have to add a model on this particular radio, and then I can paste that one in. Over the existing model, yes. So there, we have our T-Rex 250. And now we need to save this one and make sure that window's highlighted. File, save as, and I'm going to put that right in my 9X Pro directory. And we're going to call this one 250 move. _move, just like that. Save that off. Then you can close this because you don't need this anymore. Close this, also don't need that anymore. Then we're going to change our model. We're going to change our radio profile to our 9XR Pro. And we are going to open a model. And we've already saved this, our 250 move, and that's the one we're going to open. Now, Opentx Companion 2.2 realizes that this is a model for a Horus, or model for a different radio, and it says some settings need to be converted. Click yes, and it converts them, kind of. Doesn't actually, it has a whole bunch of things it doesn't know what to do with, which is all of this. Now there's a couple different ways you can do this. You can just close this window and figure them out one at a time. I like to copy all this. Copy, selection, and comma delimited. Actually it says, I believe, comma delimited. Comma delimited. Okay, and then you open up whatever spreadsheet you have. I use LibreOffice, and paste this in, and it should come up and say comma delimited. Hit OK, and this is just so you can keep track of all the things you need to change. We're just going to make that a little bit smaller. Slide that over there. There. Now we can start going through this. We're going to open this one up. Okay, the first thing we're going to take a look at is these right here. So this is our inputs. So it has no idea what to do with these inputs. And I'm going to switch over to my input screen here. I already did. And you can see it doesn't know what switch to use. Because on the Tyrannus or the Horus, there's a 3-position switch there. So that's what it's using. It's using SG, which is a 3-position switch. And you can see it here. The old one is a SG. So, and it's using up, middle, down. Well, we don't have a 3-position switch in that location. So what I do in that case, I use two 2-position switches. I use the gear switch and the aileron switch. And what I do is I make logical switches. Now there's probably already going to be logical switches here because it brought them over, but it had no idea what to do with them. So I'm just going to use those locations, and we're just going to start with that to do our expo settings. And I'm going to use, like I said, gear and aileron. So the first one we're going to do is not gear, not aileron, and that's logical switch 1, and that's both switch off. Then I'm going to do gear on. Where is it? Gear on. And aileron off. And that's logical switch 2. Logical switch 3 will be gear on and aileron on. And that'll give us all 3 of our flight modes, or all 3 of our expo levels. So we go back to mixes, and now we can assign those, or I'm sorry, inputs, and we can assign those. So instead of switch it has no idea, we're going to give it switch 1. Logical switch 1. Okay. Then this one's logical switch 2. And this just gives you a little different feel while you're flying it. And this one's logical switch 3. And then do the same thing on the elevator. Just assign the logical switches. 1, 2, and 3. Where's 3? So those should be okay. The other thing, when moving from the Horus or one of the X9 series radios, is curves. They allow you to have a lot more curves than the 9XR Pro does. So always make sure that your curves came over properly. And it looks like mine did. Usually I put curve 12 as my hold. So as long as I have 12 curves here, and they allow 16, so we're in pretty good shape. I usually don't go past 12 curves. So I really don't have to worry too much about that. Let's go back to our input screen. Looks like that's cleaned up. Looks like we have everything taken care of on there. So now we're going to hop over to our mixes. That looks like we have everything good there. We don't have any question marks. No question marks is good. Flight modes. There we have logical switches assigned, and that's where I had those original 4 were on my flight modes. So I have hold, flight mode 1, flight mode 2, flight mode 3. Now on the flight mode switch, I use the SF switch. Well, I use the SF switch and the SE switch. And one of them is for throttle hold. The SF, of course, is for throttle hold. And the SE switch is for all the rest of the flight modes. So we're going to have to set up some logical switches from there, and they'll probably be 4 through 7. 4 through 8, 4 through 7. We'll take a look. So we'll go back to our logical switches. Now, we need throttle hold. So we don't care what any of these other switches are, and switch throttle. So that's our throttle hold switch on the Turner G9XR Pro. And that's just the throttle switch. That's the actual one that flips and holds, so when we get hold. Now we have to set the rest of our flight modes. So we have to set another AND switch. So flight mode 4 will just be throttle hold. Flight mode 5 will be, let's see, that is the rudder switch on, the elevator switch off, because once again, I take two 2-position switches and make it a 3-position switch. Actually, this is the rudder switch off and the elevator switch off. Elevator switch off. And not throttle hold. And then not throttle hold is very important, because if you don't have that, then even if you flip throttle hold, it will still stay in logical switch 5 or flight mode normal. So we're going to add another one, and this will be idle up. And idle up 1 will be rudder and elevator off. And once again, not throttle hold. Always have to have that not throttle hold in there for the regular ones. So when you shut your throttle hold off, it comes right back to that flight mode. Then so rudder and elevator is flight mode or idle up 2. And once again, not throttle. So that'll give us our flight modes. Now we go back to our flight modes. Hold, yeah, we're really not going to worry about that. Flight mode 2 is actually 5, because that's our normal mode. Idle up is flight mode 6. And idle up 2 is flight mode 7, or logical switch 7. Okay, we're getting pretty close. So we've gone through, so far on our spreadsheet, we've gone through these. Actually, let's do it this way. We've gone through these. These are all done. And we covered all these switches. So we're going to, and we've covered all these switches. So we got some special functions in here that we're going to probably have to take a look at. Now, a lot of these special functions were different switches, and they did different things. They called out different configurations. They called out different flight modes. So we have to go through and reset those back up, but those would be pretty easy. I'm just going to gray these out now, just to so it keeps my notes straight, so we know we've done those. Special functions. So here's all our special functions. So we have volume, but it doesn't have a parameter for volume because it doesn't know what that's on. So we can throw that on P1 so we can control our volume. Play track logical 1, that's deactivated.
Deactivated.
Well, that's not logical 1 anymore. That's logical switch 4. And this
throttle release.
Throttle release, that is anything but throttle 4. But I don't really think we have to worry about that one. And let's go not throttle 4. Then idle down.
Idle down.
That's our normal mode. So that one is 5. Idle up is 6. Idle up is 7. Gyro rate modes, I really didn't have those set up. So I'm just going to put those on that switch. That sound doesn't even exist here, so we'll just ignore that one.
3D helicopter.
And that I just have set up to play that when it turns on. And then our aileron settings. So aileron low, we know that's our logical switch 1 because we already set those up. Logical switch 1, then that one's logical switch 2, the next aileron. Logical switch 2. and logical switch 3. So those are all our aileron modes. Then we got this reset timer, which I always put on the trainer switch if I'm not using this for training. So we'll put that on the trainer. So that does a reset. Logical switches, curves, special functions, timer resets on, outputs. Don't need to worry about that. Looks like it's ready to go. Looks like we have everything set up. So the next thing we have to do is simulate this. Now, when you simulate it, sometimes you get this conversion error. Just click OK, click OK, close this, and then we're going to save this. And just save right over what it was. Yes. Close it. File open. Open that up. Simulate. And then it works. And, oh, I got idle up here. Now, the reason, there seems to be a little bug in the system that after you move a model over, you need to save it and then reopen it before it works. I would recommend you doing that before you move it to your radio.
Deactivated. Throttle release. Idle down. Deactivated.
And it looks like
idle down.
Everything seems to be working. You can see the throttle holds working.
Idle down.
And that's one of the most important parts.
Idle down. Deactivated.
Aileron, so it's working.
Low. Throttle release. Idle down. Aileron high. Aileron low.
And it looks like everything's working. Let's turn that up a little bit.
Deactivated. Throttle release. Idle
and
down.
there you go. You just moved the model over. And that's how you move a model from any of your bigger radios with more switches and more options to some of your smaller radios like the 9 series radios, the 9XR, 9XR Pro, those type of radios. And that's how you do it. Thanks a lot for watching. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to ask. And this is Brad at Attitude RC.